Thank you,
Okay.
and welcome to Vicki Gaubeca, and I'm so happy to have her back with us again. And we're anxious to hear new news from her group. So I'm going to turn this over to Allison, and she will do our introduction. Thank you,
Great,
Allison.
great. We're happy to have you here with us, Vicki. Vicki is currently the director of the Southern Border Communities Coalition, which is a program of the Alliance in San Diego. And it brings together organizations all the way from San Diego, all the way to Brownsville, Texas, along the border. And they are working to ensure that border policies and practices are accountable and fair, that we can respect the human dignity and human rights of people at the border and prevent the loss of life in the region. Vicki has also served as the director of the ACLU New Mexico Regional Center for Border Rights, which is in Las Cruces, New Mexico, where she helped develop and implement the mission of addressing civil and human rights violations that stem from border-specific immigration policy. So lots of experience in this area. Vicki is originally from Mexico City, but she's lived in different parts along the border for more than 30 years. Now Vicki is here in Tucson, near us. So without further ado, I'm just going to open it up to you, Vicki. We're very happy to have you today, and we're eager to hear what you can tell us about these current events that are going on.
Sure, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And then also I want to really thank the group for your continued activism and monitoring what's happening in Arizona. I think that we have cause to be concerned right now about certain things that are happening, particularly in DC. Of course, this week, both the Senate and the House are in recess, and they'll come back on April 25th. And unfortunately, there's like this, I don't know how to describe it, but it feels to me like, that story about that acorn that fell onto a chicken's head and suddenly start running around saying the sky is falling. I think when I think of what's happening in DC right now, that's the sense I have right now, that people are just terrified that, and I think most of it is just the optics of politics. It's not really the reality on the ground. It's not really what's going to happen. I think people are just speaking from a place of fear. But we've been hearing a lot of concerns about Biden's, decision to lift Title 42. And as some of you may know, Title 42 is a public health law that has been used probably unlawfully or unreasonably, at the very least, to deport people apprehended at the border immediately without giving them the chance to express any fear or to apply for any other kind of immigration relief they have in the country. So we have been pressuring Biden since he was first sworn in to lift this Title 42 that was first used by the Trump administration, because we felt it was a very cruel use of a policy that resulted in great harms for people who were being deported back into Mexico. Human Rights First, for example, produced a report that showed that there was close to 9,000 violent crimes committed against people who had been deported under Title 42 in northern Mexican cities. So, of course, we want this ridiculous title to be lifted and for there to be a restoration of asylum processes or any kind of welcoming reception process at the US-Mexico border. We do believe there's a better way to manage the border, that it doesn't have to be law enforcement only and extremely punitive, and that the United States has the resources and the capacity to do this. I mean, and I'll just cite a very simple recent example. Poland, which is like half the size of Texas, has been able to receive like the lion's share of Ukrainian refugees, which is, I think it's like they've almost received 3 million Ukrainian refugees. we don't see them freaking out about this. We don't see them, screaming invasion. We don't see them suggesting that we should prosecute individuals who are fleeing war in Ukraine. Yet that's what we're seeing right now in DC. People are saying the sky is falling. We're going to experience an invasion. In a committee hearing, I even heard a senator say that if Title 42 was lifted, it would be the demise of this nation. And I'm thinking, what? Really? How can we be so gripped by fear? And to me, it seems like an irrational fear, because basically what we're doing by lifting Title 42 is just going back to what we have done for many, many years before all of this fear mongering got its height and wings under the Trump administration. So there are many vehicles that when the Senate and the House come back in, there are many vehicles that may be used, many legislative vehicles, I should clarify, that may be used as a way to move forward some of these fear-mongering initiatives, including we're expecting the Senate to take up a supplemental COVID-19 relief package. I don't know if you heard before they went on recess, they were doing this, they were thinking about considering this, but then they wanted, Langford and Sinema, our wonderful Senator Kristen Sinema, worked with Senator Langford to attach an amendment to that COVID relief package that would basically stop the administration from lifting Title 42. We're fully expecting that to come back into play. And either it will be an amendment to this COVID-19 relief package, or they're going to try to tack it on to something else that needs to move. So if any of you have any relationships with the Sinema's office or feel so inspired to give a call to her office, and unfortunately Senator Kelly is behind it too, to basically tell them that this is completely unnecessary, that Title 42 needs to go away, that there is and if folks are interested, I can send you copies of talking points. In fact, why don't I just copy those right now? I'll put a link into the chat so that you can have these talking points on why senators should vote against this, or if you have connections with senators in other states, please feel free to reach out to them as well and tell them to not support the Langford Sinema bill. In addition, just this morning, in addition to trying to create initiatives that will stop Biden from lifting Title 42, we've also heard that I don't know how to, and I don't know if anybody has connections with Michigan, but if you do, it would be great if you could call their office too. This morning we were on a call with Senator Peters' office, where they're contemplating a measure that in their minds will stop the Sinema Langford bill. This measure will actually expand the consequence delivery system, meaning that they will ramp up prosecutions in federal court for improper entry and improper reentry, which I think maybe some of you may know as Operation Streamline here in Arizona, where they charge individuals who are apprehended between ports of entry. And so that's part of the consequence delivery system, plus lateral repatriations, plus expedited removals. And what we've seen in the past is that Border Patrol doesn't really care if these individuals have a credible fear for being returned to their country. They will just send them to get prosecuted and these individuals who may qualify for asylum don't have an opportunity to express credible fear until after they've served a sentence in a federal prison.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, so that might be a lot of stuff. I'm just sorry, I'm feeling a little bit like, we got to stop these people. They're just going a little bit too far, too fast. I'll just stop there for if anybody has any questions.
Amy, do you have a question? Were you raising your hand?
Yeah, thank you, Vicki. That's helpful despite the hysteria that seems to be going on. I guess my question is, in light of the fact that Kelly in particular strategy vis-a-vis immigration seems to be, well, I've helped Arizona get more money that's gone to Pima County for shelters and so forth. So, I'm doing good. And gee, it's not that I'm against lifting Title 42. It's that we need a process, which to me is just a distraction and not, it's disingenuous, I would say. But given that that's his strategy, do you think it does do any good at this point to let him know that we think Title 42 should be lifted? Or is it better to focus on, I listened to Al Noorani's a podcast of his the other day, and it was really interesting because he just said, yeah, that's there. And what we really need in terms of immigration reform is to convince people that we have all these jobs that are going unfilled and we could come up with a sane plan, et cetera. So what would you advise is kind of the best approach if some of us were to meet with Kelly's office?
Yeah, I do think that pointing to a labor shortage is a good point, because I do think that a lot of industries are suffering because they can't hire people. There's no people to hire, especially the service industries. So I do think that that's a very powerful point, and one that will even resonate with moderate Democrats or Republicans about how we need immigrants, period. And that this sort of xenophobic approach to sealing off, our borders is basically harming us. Where, the United States and our local and national economies are being affected by this closure. One other thing that I've also heard, and you flagged this, Amy, was, and I heard this from Senator Peter's office this morning, was that that President Biden has not done a good job of presenting what the plan will be after Title 42 will be lifted. And unfortunately, I have to sort of concur with that. I don't know what it is or why they're not effectively communicating. I keep saying, Biden keeps saying this will be a whole of government approach. And our response to that is, yeah, it's whole of government, but it should also be whole of society approach, because there are thousands of volunteers across the entire border who are standing at the ready to welcome people who are seeking safety here. And I just don't understand why they're not communicating this well enough. Part of it, I think, is their own fears related to the midterm elections. And I think that's all. And honestly, I think what's fundamentally at the root of why they're concerned of the optics of what will happen when Title 42 is lifted and then suddenly there's a quote unquote surge at the border. And I think that my response to that has been, we shouldn't be responding out of fear. What we should be doing is brokering hope, saying that we are a welcoming nation, that we have welcomed immigrants before, and that really represents our values as a nation, to create an orderly, efficient system, a humane system at the US-Mexico border for managing these influxes, as opposed to just trying to punish them or scare them away or force them to cross in more dangerous remote regions where they, will likely die or at least experience some horrible injuries. I see you have a question, Barbara?
Yes, I have a couple thoughts on that issue of sort of a non-response from the administration. But in reality, so many Ukrainians have been accepted already, thousands, with no hysteria, no, collapsing of the government or whatever you want to say, but very quietly accepted and gone through a process, and everything is orderly, and they get, they're getting to some kind of housing, etc. But this is happening very quietly. Also, I think that it's beginning to happen along the border from what I hear. I forget who said it. I don't know if it was Sarah, that 21 people were brought across yesterday from Casa de la Misericordia in Nogales. So things are moving, but I think very quietly, and maybe the goal is not to raise the hackles on people that, are so sure we're being invaded and we're going to die. Those are my thoughts.
Looks like
Susie
Susie.
Sanders, did you have a comment,
Yeah.
Susie Sanders?
Susie.
Susie, you're muted. Susie, you're muted.
There you
You're
go.
muted.
Yeah, I was the one that told Barb that I've been in communication with Sister Lika at La Casa de Misericordia. And she just wrote again that there have been 37 that have been coming into the United States recently. Some go to Casa Alitas and some go directly to their sponsors. And she was saying that the program now is anyone that's been there since July seeking asylum is going to be let in, because they've had all this time to work with Justice for Our Neighbors in Tucson, the lawyers. And so they have their cases ready to go. So, and I haven't heard from Keno. I talked to Victor, the director of services at Keno this morning, and he thought Chelsea Satchow was going to meet with Sonora Coalition this afternoon, and we don't have a meeting for a week, but we should be hearing more about this dribbling of people in quietly, which is a good sign.
That's great news.
Great news, yeah.
Jean, do you want to say something and then we'll go to Sarah?
Yeah, Vicki, I'd be interested in your perspective of what we've occasionally been reading about the infighting within the administration about the immigration policy. And it sounds like the ones that are maybe higher up in the Homeland Security are holding sway over keeping things controlled and not making changes. Do you have some perspective on that?
Well, I mean, what I can say is that I know there has been a lot of infighting. But before I answer that question, are the people that are coming in quietly, are they Ukrainians or are they other nationality?
Other. No, we don't see Ukrainians in Nogales. They're the ones that have been there mostly from Northern Triangle and Mexico.
And that JFUN is helping.
Yes.
Mostly. Okay, great. Thank you. Sorry.
I would assume Florence Project is helping those at Keno
As
and
well?
the other parts of Nogales. Oh yes, I have heard that. I heard 2 days ago from Rita Danks, who works with Poncho and with the asylum seekers that are all over Nogales, Sonora. And he said they are also being crossed over. So Florence is also crossing them over.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. To answer your question, Jean, about what's happening in the White House, I have to tell you that when Biden was first inaugurated, we were very excited because a lot of our allies joined the administration on both sides, both at DHS and at the Domestic Policy Council at the White House. Most of those people are gone now. And I think a lot of it was because of that infighting where, and honestly, I just think it's politics. There's, unfortunately, I think Democrats have never really been known, recently anyway, for being standing strong for principles, and they seem to cower to the optics that of fear that conservatives are willing to bring up as a way to drive their voters out. And it's unfortunate because I really do think that if the White House took a stronger stance for justice and brokered hope and created a more welcoming, humane process at the border, instead of cowering to the fear mongering, we would be so much better off. But I think that we've done this for like 3 decades, and it's like asking them to break out of a paradigm. It's just a hard thing. It's a big lift. It's a big ask, which I think is unfortunate, because every time I talk to congressional offices about creating a more humane, efficient, orderly system, which, by the way, is language that has been adopted by the administration, they think it's like a pipe dream, or that, yeah, that sounds great, but they don't see it happening. And I wish that weren't the case. And I think that was what was at root of the conflict within the White House and within DHS top officials.
Sarah, did you have a comment?
Oh, a couple of things. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, a couple of things. I just heard this morning that the Biden administration is now not going to give Ukrainians carte blanche to come into the country, particularly over by San Diego, that they've increased their legal way to come in, so they won't have to come in through the border, which in effect would release a lot of room for other nationalities to come in. And then the other thing is, what about the 21 Republican state attorney generals that have brought a lawsuit against ending Title 42? Vicki, what do you think the ramifications of that lawsuit will be?
Yeah, I mean, I think the lawsuit is based on basically suing the administration for not following an Administrative Procedures Act. Like, they should have posted it, but they were planning to do this and gotten public comment, and before lifting it, then so they're basically suing them for a process, which is standard fare. I mean, I think that has been the basis for a lot of the lawsuits against the administration, has been that they're not following the procedures to change these laws, which, how come we didn't see those kinds of lawsuits under the former administration is the question that comes up for me. But I think that on the issue of the Ukrainians creating a system, I think that the administration would much rather see people apply from their home countries. And they're pushing for initiatives that people apply, for example, in Guatemala if they want to come, or that they apply for in I imagine for the Ukrainians in some kind of Western European country, or like in Poland or in Moldavia or someplace like that, instead of coming to the US-Mexico border. And I think what they're trying to avoid in saying this or announcing this procedure is because many of us have called them out already on the implied racism of welcoming Ukrainians at the US-Mexico border, but not, Black people who are from Haiti, or people from Guatemala, or people from Cameroon, for example, or even indigenous groups. And I mean, it just appears to be motivated by systemic racism. So I think that was an attempt to prevent Ukrainians from coming to the US-Mexico border. And I actually do think that that's unfortunate, because we should be going in the other direction. We should be creating a system at the US-Mexico border that is more welcoming at the ports of entry, so that people come to the ports of entry and don't try to cross between ports of entry, and where there is like a humane processing of individuals, regardless of where they're coming from.
Other questions or
So, I mean,
comments?
I think a combination of both, just to put a finer point on that, that we should both be processing people at the borders along within their home countries.
Other questions or comments, or where do we go from here? Oh, Lori. Lori, you're still muted.
Yeah, my question, Vicki, is about MPP and remain in Mexico. In order to be an MPP, does a person already have to done step one? You're sort of, quote, in the asylum process, so to speak, but you're being told to remain in Mexico while you wait for the next step. Number one, is that true? Am I understanding that right? And number two, if you're being crossed from Casa de Misericordia or the Kino project, or from Kino, with a lawyer by your side, does that mean you are in MPP? You have been in MPP and now you're taking the next step? And how do we think MPP is gonna work and not work with suspension of 42?
That is a really good question. And I think that we're going to be sort of wondering what that's going to look like how those two programs interact. The administration is claiming that they're only following, the court order by re-implementing MPP, and they've filed an appeal. And I think their hope is that they can eventually lift MPP as well. But that would be a really good question to ask Alba from JSON, Alba Jaramillo or Ella too. I mean, I think we've been wondering the same, how are those two programs going to play off each other? I do think though that if they get themselves inscribed in MPP and they do have an attorney, they have a better chance of coming in. But then of course we're wondering, well, what's going to happen to the people once Title 42 is lifted? Are they going to have to go through MPPs? Is everybody automatically going to be put into MPP? So those are questions that we still don't know the answer to, I don't think. So,
yeah. Anyone else? Wow, Susie.
Barb, you and I were listening to the Border Chronicle yesterday, and I got the impression that MPP was, right now, MPP is working in 3 or 4 cities, apparently, that are allowing asylum seekers to come through. But I got the impression when I asked about Nogales is that it's going to be between ports of entry. People picked up and asked for asylum between ports of entry, and then they're going to be returned under MPP. But I don't know, is it the Border Patrol that do credible fear? I don't know how they can get enlisted in the process that way. Or maybe I misunderstood. I don't know.
I'm not sure I know the answer to the MPP, and they're only between ports of entry that they're referring to MPP, but you bring up a really great question about whether Border Patrol can process credible fear. They're not supposed to. It should be an asylum officer. And that was something that we also find very concerning about using Border Patrol to process these fears, because they're not encouraging them. They don't even know how to process these. It should be an asylum officer who's adequately trained to do this. And the response that we have from the administration is that they're going to try to hire more asylum officers at the border. We'll see how that goes. But we really did not think that Border Patrol, we think that the job of Border Patrol should only be to receive and refer them to maybe a welcoming center that has asylum officers and trauma specialists and child welfare specialists, and in an environment that allows people to actually express credible fear, because that is something that's difficult to do in any circumstance, much less when you encounter a Border Patrol agent.
John.
Yeah, my experience with Border Patrol is the ones that are, if you ever see them down on the line, they have absolutely no interest in helping anybody. In fact, they're throwing their documents away in Texas.
Yeah.
Scott Nickel has documented that they've got passports in there, birth certificates. So they're purposely, violating their human rights. So I have zero confidence in that model. And, and again, Congress, they're on break right now, but they're always on break. So I have zero confidence in the Biden administration, just like I had zero confidence with the Trump administration.
Yeah, I feel you, John. And I completely agree. When we meet with congressional officers in DC, we keep telling them Border Patrol doesn't want this job. So it's time they should be cut out of this process.
Yeah.
But again, it takes a great deal of courage to change the paradigm. But that doesn't mean we can't keep pushing for it, right? And maybe one day, I know it's a pipe dream, but let's que se puede, as they say.
Ellen Konopowski, did you have a comment or a question? You're on mute.
Yes, on the what John said about throwing away their papers and whatnot. When we were in Nogales, welcoming those who'd been turned back, there was a young man who'd been taken to the hospital with several injuries. And after he was returned and taken in an ambulance to the hospital there in Nogales, I asked the nurse where he had been taken. And she said, we have no idea. We don't know what even happened there. And then she said something that just broke my heart. She said, Los gringos son malos. The gringos are bad people. She said they take everything and just throw it away. They take their medicines, they take their papers, they take any information they may have. And I'm sure she was referring to Border Patrol. So they didn't know what had happened to this young man. It just breaks my heart, but to support what John is saying, I'm afraid it's true.
Thanks. Other?
I have one comment if there's still a little time here.
Sure.
I'm sitting and listening to this conversation, and being here in Virginia, it's a whole different sort of atmosphere in the public that really has no notion of what's going on at the border or understanding. They only sort of know what they hear, but nobody really understands it. And I love, Vicki, what you said earlier, as far as messaging, and what's the positive message, and what could we say that would be a positive spin on this whole thing. And I love what you said, which was, we have thousands of volunteers at the border who are standing ready to welcome people who will be lawfully seeking asylum at our southern border. If we could promote that message that counteracts the fear, there may be something positive that people would hear from it, because it always feels like we're on the back foot reacting to the negative things that are said. But if we came out with a strong statement, we have thousands of volunteers at the border to help process these people who are here who are going to be here lawfully, maybe that would be a spin we could try to push on things, so that we're not on the back foot always reacting to all this negativity. Just a thought.
Wow. Any other questions? If not, Lori, you had something.
Just, quickly, Vicki, so I guess he's a senator, Senator Peters, the man from Michigan. I mean, in a way he wanted to help, but from what you said, he's just going back to the same old border enforcement stuff and criminalization stuff. Did you get any inkling of openness, understanding? Did he listen to you? Was there any opening there at all?
I think that in general, Senator Peters is a good ally to work with. But in this instance, for some reason, I think that and you'll see soon that they're going to issue a letter to buy in. I think that part of the motivation is that he's frustrated that they have been asking the White House for a plan and they haven't really gotten one. And so I think that's part of his frustration. But the other part is, and this is what we're saying, is that why are you punishing people who might have a lawful claim for asylum at the US-Mexico border by punishing them even more when you should be punishing the administration, not people who are, lawfully seeking asylum or some other kind of immigration relief at the border, or even people who are just, trying to seek a better life or to reunite with family members here. We should give them, an opportunity to do so, particularly because of the labor shortages that we're experiencing right now. We should give them an opportunity to do so, I think.
Okay.
And I didn't see much openness. That doesn't mean we're going to stop harassing them for that. And if you'd like, I will, once they issue that letter, I'll be happy to send it to the group.
Thank you.
Right.
Vicki, can you send that to Allison since you're kind of in contact, and we'll get it from her?
Will do.
It's kind of discouraging. Claudette, you had a comment?
Well, just sort of a half-formed idea. I was thinking about what Allison suggested about a strong positive kind of motion. And I was also trying to link that up with the need for workers in certain fields. It seems to me, and it may be a terrible idea, so go ahead and bat me down, but it seems to me that if there were some sort of business community, I know there's a lot of American businesses that are saying we need workers. And they really are allies in that sense. If there could be some way of saying, we're screening people before they even come as to, can we hire them? That probably sounds like adding another layer, but it might encourage people to look at immigration differently. We know we have, say, 6,000 people down here who are qualified to do healthcare in one way or another, that we're trying to work. If businesses could be involved trying to work with this too, it might be helpful. Or not, just a half-formed thought.
Yep, good.
Well, I think we're now at the point where we're generating ideas and processes that might be feasible. And I'd like to sort of take us on and move into that realm a little bit more, and thank Vicki. And there any more comments or thoughts we'd like to ask her in closing? Thank you so much. I mean, unfortunately, you didn't bring us a lot of hope. I'm sorry. but we see what we need to be doing, I think. And what I'd like to do at this point is to move on, and you're welcome to stay with us if you have time to do that.